Okay. All right. Well, um, this is the Green Corn Rebellion show, and today I'm here with Benjamin Dixon, the host of the Benjamin Dixon Show, and editor in chief of the Progressive Army.
Hey,
Yeah.
glad to be here, brother. Thanks for having me. And I don't know, every time I hear editor in chief of the Progressive Army, I'm like, oh, that sounds impressive.
Well, it is. Yeah. Want to start by saying I've been a fan of yours since around 2016 or so.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, I remember I saw you in some video someone made during the primary against Hillary Clinton, and there was a clip of you talking about something that the Clintons did, and I was like, "Oh, that guy's cool." I didn't
Oh
really know who you were at
yeah.
the time,
Yeah.
and then eventually, when I went to college, that's when I started getting on YouTube more often,
Hmm.
since I was able to get online, and I found your show, and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." So yeah, um,
Appreciate it, man. I appreciate the support, and it's time. If I can give you any advice, not that this is a show about giving people advice, but time goes by so quickly. I promise you, 2016 feels like yesterday, and we're almost at a full 4 years. Like we're 3 years and
I know,
into this
right?
new primary season, so we haven't had a chance to breathe yet, and so time moves fast. So man, I'm proud of the work that you're doing. I don't know how long you've been doing it, but the fact that you started so early is dope, man. Just keep doing it.
Thanks, thanks. Oh wow, yeah, that's amazing to hear from you. But yeah, I've been doing it since May. I've had the idea to start a show for about a year now,
Hmm.
and finally decided to do it. But yeah, so I hope you're doing well today. I wasn't really sure exactly what all I was gonna make our little chat about, so I
Right,
wrote
right.
down a couple of questions. Um, the first one is, what made you want to start a show and also start the Progressive Army?
Yeah. So um, I've been politically active, seriously politically active, I would say, since 2008. I was considering running for office myself somewhere around 2008. I'm an old man. I'm gonna be 40 next year. So, like, folks don't know. They're like, "Well, how old were you in 2008?" I was 20. I was 28. And so I considered running for office, but I decided not to because one thing I get extremely frustrated easily with politics in general, like not the political world, but people who play politics and
Yeah.
don't get anything done. Like it doesn't matter. Like when I grew up in church, I hated politics in church. I hated politics in academia, and so I quickly realized I don't think I want to run for office because I would get elected and then I would get tired of it. Then I would like be like screw y'all and I'm gone, you know. So I try to find a lane, and so I started writing commentary, and I wrote a book in 2010, and so what really got me to jump into doing the show was 2014, when between Trayvon Martin being killed and Michael
Hmm.
Brown being killed, and seeing how I was passionate about those issues, obviously, but I was unable to go physically and be in those environments and to protest there. Um, and I couldn't do it because I was married. I had two kids at the time. I have three now, and because I was trapped by my responsibilities and also trapped, by capitalism. I had to make money. I had to pay the bills, and I didn't have money to go, and I couldn't leave my family in Boston at the time by themselves. So I was like, how do I participate? How do I participate in this world of political activism, um, but not be able to actually go anywhere, or at least not go often, or I can't risk being arrested because who's going to pick up milk for the kids,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And so I realized that the best way for me to do it was to um, broadcast from my home and or broadcast from a studio, which I later started doing, and I just plunged myself into that world, and I've been working on it ever since. I'll do much shorter on in terms of the Progressive Army. Long and short of it was we were doing our show live, and one of the viewers who has since become a good friend of mine suggested, or actually didn't even suggest. One night he was like, "Good night, Progressive Army," at the end of our show, and I was like, "Holy crap!" I'm taking that. And I told him, I was like, "Hey, bro, can I get that name? Do you mind if I use that?" And he was like, "It's all ours." And we got the domain, and we set it up as a news and commentary website, and that's that.
Hmm, that's cool. That's really cool. I was gonna also ask if you ever thought about running for office before, because that's something I might do in the future as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, definitely. I mean, I don't
um,
like for me personally. I don't think I will do it. But I highly recommend people to do it because we need people on the inside. And don't worry about not being elite enough because the Democratic Party, like we have two major parties. Sure, you can run with the Green Party, but if you need an infrastructure, more than likely you're going to run with the Democratic Party. There's
yeah,
nothing wrong with that. But the Democratic Party, one big failing that they have is that they make you it's very elitist in terms of like they want somebody with a Ivy League education. They want somebody who's a certain height and certain look and real polished. And
yeah,
and I would say, forget that. I don't care if you went to community college. If you have the grit and the tenacity to run for office, man, get in there and do it.
yeah. My second question I have here is, what made you major in economics in college?
That's a funny story, actually. I'm not exactly proud of this story. But I'll be
Okay.
I'll be honest. I'll be transparent. So I dropped out of college quite a few times.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, a couple of times I dropped. The first time I dropped out because I was um I was still under the age limit where my financial aid was dependent on my parents.
Hmm.
And we got to the point where I couldn't get any financial aid. So I just couldn't afford to go to school. So I just dropped out. The second time I dropped out, I was paying my own money to go to school. And I realized, you know what? I don't really like this. I don't really like anything I'm studying. And I was taking a whole bunch of courses. So this was like 19, I dropped out the first time. 2021, I dropped out the second time because I was paying cash out of pocket. I was like, I forget this, and I'm not going to waste my money, and I dropped out again. Um, so when I came back finally, the reason I came back is I promised my dad that I would get my degree, and he passed away before I could do it, and I just decided, you know what, he won't know, but I'll still do it anyway. And I just looked at all of my credits. And I looked at everything. I laid out all of my 100 credits or however many I had. I don't know. And I said, what is the easiest way for me to finish? For me to finish on the fastest route possible. And it was economics because I had so many business courses and I had so accounting courses that were out of the way, and accounting wasn't for me, obviously. And so I finished in economics. Here's the funny thing about it, right? This is how like life is really serendipitous for me in a lot of ways. Once I sat in the seat and took my first real economics course, there was no turning back. It was like that's what helped me finish. I was like, I should have been doing this from the first place. If I had known that I loved economics and economic policies and tax policy, macroeconomics particularly, if I had known that that's what was in that course for me in that field, I would never have dropped out. I would have just, probably gone to an Ivy League school for grad school for, a master's or a PhD because I really loved it. And once I got in my right field, um, I aced every class. Like I finished in no time, aced every class, and so I didn't really get to economics in a really distinguished way, but I finished with some distinction, I think.
That's good. And what made you get your master's in political science?
That's when I was at that cusp, like immediately after I finished I finished my bachelor's in 2006. I was 26. That shows
Hmm.
you how long it took me. Like I dropped out a couple times, and then Then I got married, and my wife had a master's. I'm like, I really want to do something in politics. I was considering running for office. And I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to run for office, then I need to know what I'm doing. And I kind of expected political science to be um, more practical, more praxis versus theory, but it was very theoretical. And and then it's the combination, right? It's the combination of economics in my undergrad and political science in my graduate studies that really kind of shaped my mind and gave me the grounding, the theoretical grounding for a lot of my arguments that I make. I make it based on what I learned, like literally what I learned in the books and what I still read, sometimes in my spare time. Um, and also what it did, it showed me how much academia is shaped for a particular ideology. And what I mean by that is when I got my economics degree, we're all learning Chicago style economics, the Chicago School of Economics. We're learning neoliberalism. We're
Mm-hmm.
learning trickle down economic theory. Like there rarely is ever was there a discussion about alternate economic theories. Um, and so I digested all of that and I learned it and I enjoyed it just for the pure science of economics, right? But I also understand now the perspective of everybody who goes to who gets a degree in it, no matter what level, no matter what type of school, but particularly people coming from Ivy League schools and institutions that are respected. They are taught one style of economic theory. So it makes sense that even with the Democratic Party, when the president surrounds himself with economic advisors, if you're wondering why we keep getting the same thing, it's because they're all being taught the same exact thing in school. Every
Mm-hmm.
economist is taught the Chicago School of Economic Theory, and with very rare exception. And so I was able to couple that understanding. I have the knowledge of understanding, like I understand the Chicago School, I understand the theory, but I also know how that theory is applied and how it controls everything and how no one looks at any other alternative theory. But then, and I mean, even Keynesian economics is considered to be antiquated and not the model that we should study, right? So we study Keynesian economics for the pure historical veracity of it, like it plays such a major role in our history.
Mm-hmm.
However, they don't teach it as something that we should employ now. Okay, so that's that. But with political science, what I learned, particularly, I focused on international relations theory. And in international relations theory, what I learned was the same thing happens there. Like we're all taught, for the most part, um, we're taught to be realist. Neo-realist is the actual theory where we understand the world through the lens of power, right? Everybody is after power, and so all the decisions that are made are for that accumulation of power for self-preservation and to achieve your goals. Here's the thing about that: when you have everybody in your military industrial complex with that type of thinking, that's how you have the continued expansion of American empire, unabated. No one's going to
Mm-hmm.
challenge that because the conventional wisdom is realism. Now, the good thing about international relations theory on a grad level is that you don't just study one, you study all of them. Like, and that's where I got introduced to a lot more about Marxist international theory, and the it's escaping me. So you have neoliberalism as an international relations theory, not the economic paradigm. And I'm sorry to get so academic on you, but like
No, you're
I
good.
love this stuff. So you have neoliberalism as an international paradigm, and that's more about international trade than it is how we understand neoliberalism here in the United States. You have neo-realism, which is what everyone believe you really study, and it's the conventional wisdom. The founder of that theory, Kenneth Waltz, in his book Theory of International Politics, that really shapes the minds of almost anybody, whether they're Republican, whether they're neoconservative, whether they are a Democrat. They really view our foreign policy through the lens of realism. Then you have the English school, and you have so many different schools. So you got a chance to study all of them versus just having one thing shoved down your throat like economic policy. But those two, I would say, like, that's the first time in my life, like, I've always been a great student in school. Like, well, no. Let me rephrase. I've always been smart. I was never a great student. I hated my courses. I hated. I'm like, why am I doing this? This is stupid. Sure, I understand calculus too, but why the hell am I doing it? And finally, I found stuff that resonated, and I understood how to apply it. Once I
Mhm.
found that, man, the rest is history.
Hmm. That's cool. And my third question is, what influences or what has influenced your political views the most
Mm.
within your life?
Influence. So outside of my studies, believe it or not, my religion, man, my faith. Like I'm a Christian, and
Mm-hmm.
it's I grew up in the Baptist church. My dad was a preacher, was a minister for 40 years before he died. And so all I've known growing up on Sunday was going to church. But what he preached and what we believed and what we used our religion for was to help people. Like literally, the whole purpose of us doing what we were doing was to help everybody, and especially those people who needed it the most. Um, and so every aspect of my entire worldview, as much as it was shaped by my religion was shaped by helping people. And so what shaped my politics was seeing how my religion was being used for the exact opposite thing in the
Mm-hmm.
world of politics. So seeing the discrepancy, I'm like, something doesn't match up. Like,
Yeah.
George W. Bush, you claim to be a Christian, but man, you're killing all of these innocent people in Iraq. Like
Yeah.
something doesn't and your passing policies hurting the LGBTQ community. Like, whether and don't get me wrong, like I grew up conservative in terms of LGBTQ rights, but I actually grew up and I actually matured and understood the problem with that, with the homophobia in the black church. And
Mm-hmm.
that's still something we have to be accountable for to this day. But as I grew up, and I actually grew up mentally and emotionally, I started seeing how religion was being used to hurt so many people except for rich white people.
Yeah.
So when I saw that, that's what pushed me into political participation. That's what pushed me into weaponizing my faith for progress, the way evangelicals weaponize their faith to for regress. And
Mm-hmm.
so those are the I think that's the biggest shaper of my political participation. Even to this day, it's been 8 years since I wrote that book. God is not a Republican, but even
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, 9 years. It's 2019, and to this day, that's still kind of the Rosetta, the guiding stone for me.
Hmm. That's cool. I was growing up, I wasn't necessarily very religious at all. I mean, I consider
Hmm.
myself a Christian, but for me, my politics was mostly influenced, well, by my parents, because my
Yeah.
parents are fairly progressive as well. Um, Even though they're baby boomers, they're really progressive baby boomers.
Imagine that. How does
Right?
that work? No, man.
And
Yeah.
but no, like I remember when I was, what was it? I went to a Christian school for like the
Hmm.
first 6.5 years of my schooling, and it was odd because in '04, I remember my parents, we supported John Edwards. Yes, it was
Okay.
John Edwards
Yeah.
in the primary, and then it was John Kerry because he got the nomination.
Hmm.
And the kids at school were like, "Oh, he's a baby killer." And I'm like, "What?" And then I asked my mom what that meant, and she was like, "Oh, they're talking about abortion, but it's not
Hmm.
really like that." And I
Hmm.
was, "Oh, okay." And then like ever since, like my mom, she was the one that told me um, about abortion rights and how it's the woman's right to choose and all
Yeah.
that. And then I remember homophobia was really huge at that school as
Yeah.
well.
Yep.
And when I was like 7 or whatever, I was like, I don't know what being gay means. And my mom, she told me what it was. And she's like, there's nothing wrong with being gay. They should be able to live their lives and not be
Right.
discriminated against, just like
Right. For
us.
sure.
They should be able to get married. And I was like, okay. So whenever I was that young, I was that weird liberal kid with all the conservative Christians,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was that. It, it's odd.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's really difficult. Like, um, mm, I don't know how many people know this about me. I'm sure I've said it on my show a couple of times, but I'm not known for my time as being a minister. So, there was a period like I was following in my dad's footsteps and I thought I was going to be a minister. Problem is I cuss way too much to be a preacher. So, I decided to just stick with politics.
Hmm.
But the one sermon that I still remember to this day was the one about God being a God of justice. And
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure it came from the book of Isaiah. And it talked about how truth had fallen in the street and there was no one who would stand up for justice. And then God said, since no one else would do it, he'll do it himself. Dope. I was going to say a dope ass scripture, but it's a dope scripture. It's really the language that was used by Elijah, I think, who wrote the book of Isaiah, or was it Isaiah? See, I'm so far removed from it, I'm forgetting stuff. But the language was like so descriptive, and it would be Avengers Infinity War for that era. Like you're
Hmm.
reading this, you're like, oh my goodness! Like he described God as this person who comes down, stood up on his throne, and came down to bring justice in an unjust society. So as I was teaching that sermon and preaching that sermon one time, um, I connected it directly to Thomas Jefferson said, if God is just, and his justice won't wait long. I'm massacred. That's not the right quote, but that's basically a paraphrase. Basically, he's saying I'm fearful for my country because God is just. Obviously, there's some discrepancies there. There's some hypocrisy there because he was a slave owner, but he really puts
Yeah.
it in context that
Hmm.
there's injustices in America. And so, if you look at the role that God in the Bible plays, particularly the New Testament, Jesus plays, he was always there for the least of these. He was always there for people like the woman at the well, like the blind man. He was overturning the tables in the temple when people were trying to he ran the bankers out of the temple. Right, he challenged the political system of the day. He challenged the economic system of the day. I mean, Christ would have, this is going to be crazy, but Christ was so radical. I mean, when he whipped the bankers out of the church, that's like Antifa, man. You
Yeah.
know, Christ was about that life. And
Yeah.
so, one of the things was I was preaching that sermon, of course, I wasn't preaching Antifa at the time, but members were really, really confused. They were
Hmm.
like Christians were really confused because they had always been told that they had to understand God from the perspective of anti-abortion and anti-gay rights. So if
Hmm.
you were going to be a Christian, your political participation meant that you had to oppose anybody who wanted a woman to be able to choose and wanted couples to be able to marry whoever they want to marry as long as they were consenting adults. Members were really confused by that. And so I had a couple come up to me after the sermon and said they really appreciated me breaking that down for them because they were black people who for years felt like they had to vote with the Republican Party because of abortion and because of gay rights. And I'm
Hmm.
like, no, you're missing. And this is why it was so important. I'm like, what I wanted to make sure I convey to you is that God is just as concerned with justice. He's just as concerned with economic justice. He's just as concerned with social justice. I mean, he's just as concerned. I mean, the Bible talks about not charging interest, right? Not
Hmm.
charging usury. There's so many scriptures preaching against charging interest. But that's the fundamental of that's like the founding principle of capitalism and
Yeah.
finance capitalism at that, right? And so, they're never going to teach you in these conservative Christian environments like the school you grew up in. They're never going to teach you that part of the Bible because that part of the Bible directly challenges this power structure.
Hmm. 100%. Let's see here. You mentioned the Iraq War earlier.
Hmm.
I wanted to know, because I was young at the time whenever it happened. Like I was 5. I was 5 when it happened, but I
Wow.
remember it. Like I remember watching the news, and I remember it happening. I remember watching the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. They would show the death total of troops every night or whatever, for like for like a year or so. What was that like in real time, like as an adult? Like for me, like it was just like I know war is bad, I know we're just killing people, but then I
Right.
got older and learned a lot more about it. I was like,
Right.
whoa, this
Oh
is
man.
horrible.
So you
Like,
were 5 in 2003.
yes.
Oh God. I was 23 in 2003, so I got you by a good 18 years. Okay, just know where we are. Okay, so here's I feel like you're asking me a baby boomer about what it was like during World War II. That's how I feel right now. But I remember I remember vividly 9/11.
Hmm.
My older brother was actually at near one of the towers, and he had to get underneath a cart, and and he
Oh
got
wow.
covered with smoke, and thankfully, he was far enough away that this dust that got on him wasn't the toxic stuff. I never
Hmm.
thought about that till just now, just this moment. Like he had pictures of all the smoke that covered him, but thankfully he didn't deal with any of the sicknesses that so many people did.
Yeah.
And so I remember vividly. I remember I was I was in a training course, and the secretary ran in and said they bombed the towers. They bombed the towers, and we all ran out and we looked, and one of the towers had collapsed. The second one hadn't collapsed yet, and this town kind of just went like a ghost town. The city that I was in, you couldn't really find anybody on the streets. And weirdly, the only person I saw on the street was this it was in Florida at the time. It was basically this big pickup redneck truck with the American flag flying on it and just driving through town, and the guys on the back yelling USA, USA, USA. I tell you, that was the most patriotic moment that I ever felt and will ever feel again, because we were wounded. Like we
Hmm.
were seriously wounded and people were dying. And at the time, that day, literally that day, we couldn't get up with our brother, so we didn't even know where he was. And so I, like, in my mind, I'm like, man, if something happened to my brother, I'm joining the military and I'm going to fight. So it was a really crazy moment where I was still the same me, where I'm not a pacifist by any. I've never been a pacifist, but war is not my thing. I'm not a military guy, but
Yeah.
that's how deeply wounded America was in that moment. Now, what you started to see happening very shortly after was the manipulation of that feeling and that sentiment taking
Hmm.
place from the White House and George W. Bush. And we quickly started seeing now, and we still had the bitter taste in our mouth of the 2000 election. So we, of course, were going to watch him closely like a hawk. And so we were able to overcome these over hyper sensationalized feelings of patriotism, because we knew the type of machinations that George W. Bush would use for his personal gain. And so we were able to see clearly the drum beats of war pushing us into battle. And very quickly, that hyper sensationalized patriotism turned into an anti-war movement, and people who on September 11th, 2001 may very well have gone to fight to protect and defend the country from future attacks. Some of those same people started getting into the streets and protesting because we saw the route that they were going. They were going to attack the wrong people. They were
Hmm.
going to fight the wrong people. They would not acknowledge our culpability in creating the terrorists that attacked us. They were not going about it the right way. And so there was a huge anti war movement, protest everywhere. And we all, in our own way, different locations, participated in that push. And what I remember most about 2003 was the very first casualty. The very first casualty damn, I sound like an old timer. I sound like I'm giving them. Literally sound like I'm telling the story of Saving Private Ryan or something from World War II. But the very first casualty that I saw televised was the family televised. It was a black man. It was a black soldier. He was on a helicopter, and the helicopter crashed. It wasn't even. It wasn't even in combat. They were in the field of the theater of combat, but the helicopter just crashed, malfunctioned, and killed multiple soldiers. But I do remember the very first one that they reported as being dead was a young black soldier, and that family got on television and was like, "This is what your war has done. This is what George Bush. This is what your war has done and cost us and cost our family." Unfortunately, there would be thousands of soldiers who would die over the last 17 years. Hell,
Mm-hmm.
16 years,
Yeah,
2003.
16.
So
Yeah.
16 years. And so that was, but what they weren't telling us at the time, what they did tell us at the time was how many Iraqi civilians were dying. And
Yeah.
so that's what we started to find out over time, and to see how bloody America's hands really were.
Yeah. But yeah, that the Iraq War that helped. That was something that influenced me to be more anti-war with my politics whenever I
Right.
was younger. I remember supporting Kerry, even though I was like 6. But like I remember supporting Kerry, thinking, he's gonna get us out of that war. And then I remember supporting Obama because I thought that he was gonna get us out of
Jeez, so you were
Iraq.
like 10? Were you
I
10 when
was I
Obama
was
became
10.
president?
See, that was the first election that I really, really paid attention to, and
Yeah.
it's like, like I was really excited about Obama in the primary,
Right.
and like I was in fourth grade during the primary, and
I
then
I
fifth
know
grade
there's always,
elected.
I don't mean to cut you off, man, but I know there's always going to be a difference in age. Like I'm just at that age where I'm amazed at how old I am. Like I can't believe I'm this old. But at the time, uh, do you still have me, or did we get
Yeah,
disconnected?
no,
Okay, so election night, you were 10.
mhm.
I was living, I had a home in South Florida. I had a big party. I had like 20 people come to my house. We popped bottles of champagne when he won, and splashed champagne all over my house, all in the front yard and stuff. And then we got in the car. I was driving a little blue Audi. I had a little Audi, and so I was singing the song, "My president is black, my Audi is blue." And so we were driving to the club, and then we partied the entire night at the club, all night. It was a beautiful thing. And man, you were 10 years old. Good God. I'm
Yeah,
old.
I was in fifth grade, and then when his inauguration came, I stayed home sick that day because it was like a
Oh,
Tuesday,
yeah.
and I stayed home sick that day so I could watch it with my mom on TV. And whenever he was speaking, like I sat next to the TV, and my mom took a picture of me and
Oh,
Obama while
nice.
he was talking,
Yeah.
and she put it on my birthday cake for my 11th birthday.
Ah,
And
nice.
that year I had a Black History themed birthday party. So yeah, that
Oh,
was 10 years ago. That was me back then.
so
And
you've been like predestined to do this political thing, little brother.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, let me see here. I have two more questions.
Yeah, no problem.
What are your current thoughts on the presidential race?
I'm tired of it already, particularly the primaries. I absolutely, and I'll vent here, man. Like, I don't care who hears this. Like, let it go far and wide. Like, I'm just so sick and tired of Bernie supporters. I'm so sick and tired of Elizabeth Warren supporters. I'm sick and tired of the Yang gang. I'm tired of all of y'all. All of y'all are working my damn nerves. Because here's the thing, like, don't get me wrong, there is a definitive difference. There's a very distinct difference between Bernie Sanders and everybody else. That's
Hmm.
why I'm supporting Bernie Sanders. But at the same damn time, if Bernie Sanders doesn't get this nomination, we have a white supremacist in the White House. We have a fascist in the White House. I hate with a passion Joe Biden. I do not like Joe Biden. I don't want him to get the nomination. I will work every day to make it possible for him to stop him, rather, from becoming the nominee. That said, if he becomes a nominee, I'm going to put on a Joe Biden shirt and I'm going to hate it. I'm going to grit my teeth. I'm going to be pissed off. But
Mm-hmm.
we've got a fascist in the White House. Listen, people said in 2016, oh, it can't get that bad.
It's gotten
Okay,
bad.
yeah, y'all were wrong. Every single person who said that was wrong. Donald Trump needs only two more judicial picks, and then he will have 1/4 of all of the judiciary, the federal judiciary across this country, was appointed by Donald Trump. The
Mm-hmm.
impact of those hyper conservative judges, those activist judges, will be felt and by the time you're in your 40s, man. We
Yeah.
won't be able to, because they are going to be alive and well for at least the next 30 years. That's the
Mm-hmm.
kind of fight that we're up against.
Yep.
And so I'm sorry, that makes you in your 50s. So anybody who's like, oh, we're okay, let me rephrase what I said. I'm not tired of the different support groups, but I am absolutely tired and going to rain hell down on Twitter against anybody who's like, oh, I'm never Bernie. Really? Because if Bernie gets that nomination, that means it's Bernie or a fascist. Are you still never Bernie? If so, we need to drag you. Well, that's where cancel culture need to comes in. Oh, I'm anti. I'm never Warren. Really?
Mm-hmm.
We have a fascist in the White House. Oh, I'm never Biden. Well, I'm not going to go as hard against those people because I hate Joe Biden, but we have a fascist
Yeah.
in the White House. So I'm tired of the lines being drawn so fiercely where it's almost impossible for a person to cross over and support whoever wins. Like it's going to be almost impossible for Hillary. See, it's just like Hillary and Bernie back in 2016. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
flavor, same. But for some Warren supporters to come over and support Bernie because they've said so much on the internet, they've said so much. Oh, I'll never vote for Bernie. I'll never do this, and I hate all the Bernie supporters. Well, what are you going to do? Stay home and allow fascists to win? And what I think we have to do, the solution, is that we need people of good conscience in each camp, whether you be from the Yang Gang all the way up to Bernie Sanders, to argue policy. Don't argue personality. Don't
Yes.
argue people. Don't get into this cult of personality. I do not love Bernie Sanders. I don't care any more about Bernie Sanders than I care about Joe Biden. It's just that Bernie Sanders is fighting for literally 9 out of my 10 policies. 9 of my 10 policies he's fighting for. The one he doesn't fight for is reparations. And you know what? All right, he's not going to fight for that. But 9 out of 10, come on. Of course, I'm going to support Bernie Sanders, but I don't love him. And I'm not going to be fawning over him. And I'm not going to be pandering for him on my show and making my entire show a pro Bernie platform. We're going to talk about the policies, and we're going to call it the BS like we always do. If it's BS towards Bernie Sanders, I'm more than happy to dissect it. If it's some BS coming from Bernie Sanders or Bernie Sanders supporters, I'm going to treat it the same way. Because at the end of the day, it's not about how much I protect or like Bernie Sanders. It's about how many policies he's supporting that I support. And that's why he's going to get my vote.
Cool. I feel a lot the same way with that, especially about policy, because I feel like a lot of people they do get wrapped up in the, what's it, the
The cult of
atmosphere of the
personality.
yes, like the atmosphere of the candidate or whatever, and they don't actually think about, well, like their policies.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, and last question is who are your favorite music artists? What kind of music do you
Hey,
listen to?
I like that question. I need to start doing that. I need to start asking questions like that because that's actually my favorite question you've asked so far. No, I'm joking. I'm enjoying the entire interview, man. Thanks for having me. Music artists, two guys, and I have been their fans, the biggest fans since high school or younger. Whew, Joe Thomas, the R&B singer Joe.
Hmm.
He sings. Older folks will know him from I Want to Know,
Yeah.
and then I believe it or not, I've never seen a single episode of the show Power, so
Hmm.
I didn't even know he was the guy singing. That he sang the opening credits. So now I got to go watch Power just because Joe is singing it. So Joe is my favorite R&B artist, and Kirk goddamn Franklin.
Oh, okay. I
Kirk
like him.
Franklin Kirk Franklin shaped my life in a lot of ways. Like I said, I grew up in church. Definitely, like I would drop everything I'm doing right now and go on tour with Kirk if he would have me. So I would leave politics to go on tour with Kirk. So there you go.
All right. Well, Those are good. I saw the other day on Twitter you posted that Pearl Jam was
Yeah,
following you. That
yeah.
was
That
interesting.
that blew me away because I don't remember following Pearl Jam because I saw them pop up in my timeline, and I'm like, what? And then I looked, I was following them. I'm like, when did I follow them? And then I was even more surprised that they followed me. And then I was like, well, maybe they're one of these accounts that follows like a million people, and then they have like a million followers. And it was like, no, they have 3.5 million followers, and I'm one of the 800 people that they follow. So
That's
that
crazy.
means they actually like some reason
Yeah.
paid attention
You
to
know,
me, and it was cool.
their lead singer, Eddie Vedder, he's a huge progressive. So that could be why. I
Right.
mean,
So now I'm gonna investigate and learn about them. And I'm ashamed I don't know them musically very well. I mean, obviously everybody's heard of Pearl Jam,
yeah.
everybody's heard a Pearl Jam song. But I didn't even know that their lead singer was a progressive. So,
Yeah.
but now maybe I'll hunt them down, see if I can get them on the show.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it's been nice having you on the show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this.
Hey, my pleasure, man. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. So thanks for having me. Good luck with your show, man.
Thanks.
And I'm more than happy to share any tips with you. We could do it online or we could do it offline to help, push you along the way. So let me know what you need, and I'll be glad to help out.
All right. Thanks.
Take care, man. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
You too.
All right. Bye bye.